Looking back, I should have recognized all the warning signs, small, casual remarks, subtle changes in conduct that would have revealed my exact position within my own family if I had been paying attention. But I wasn't listening. I was too preoccupied with being the breadwinner, the trustworthy person, the idiot who believed that sacrifice and love were enough to maintain a family's unity. I was mistaken. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Malcolm, and I am 58 years old. For most of my life, I worked hard and built a life for my family, like a good husband and father should. Growing up, I didn't come from a wealthy home, so I made sure they had more than I ever did. I safeguarded them. I worked for everything. I started with nothing, so there isn't some trust fund inheritance waiting for me. Deborah, my wife, stayed home to raise our daughter while I worked my way up the corporate ladder at a small accounting firm, Sophia. She wanted to be there for Sophia full time, and I wanted to make sure she could. So I worked long hours, skipped weekends, took no vacations. Because I was never worried about money, I bought a cozy home in Rosewood Heights, a peaceful suburban neighborhood to ensure my family had the best. I made sure Sophia was in a place where families gathered for Sunday barbecues, where children rode bikes down the block. I paid for all her extracurricular activities, sent her to the top private schools, and when the time came, I wrote the check for college, no loans, just a father taking care of his child. I never required gratitude, that's why I did it. That's why I took care of them. I never once asked for a thank you. My wife, my daughter, my family, they were my entire world. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Maybe it was subtle at first, and I ignored it, because I believed, no, I was certain, that my wife and daughter would never treat me with the same disregard others might. Then, Deborah started making financial decisions without me. At first, it was a small, expensive piece of furniture. Then, a last-minute vacation, and every time I questioned it, she would wave me off. "You can afford it, Malcolm. Why are you making such a big deal?" Then there was Sophia. Her appreciation slowly turned into demand. She never hesitated to ask for cash, for new clothes, for trips with friends, for a city apartment. But after the wedding, "Thank you, Dad," became scarce, if not non-existent. I was overjoyed when Sophia got engaged to Tyler, a corporate lawyer from a wealthy family. I offered to pay for half the wedding, even though Tyler's parents insisted they could handle it. Smiled at my daughter. "I want you to have the wedding of your dreams. This is my gift to you." I should have noticed it then, how her eyes shifted toward her mother, as if confirming something in silence. I should have listened. When Deborah started making all the decisions, the venue, the guest list, I should have noticed how they handled everything, while I simply signed the checks, like some faceless sponsor. I should have seen how they avoided talking about the wedding around me. But I didn't. I believed that. Of course, they would include me. I was wrong. The night before the wedding, I walked into the kitchen smiling. "I'm so excited for the wedding tomorrow." And Deborah, she laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a guilty chuckle, a full, genuine laugh, like I had just told the funniest joke in the world. Then she smiled. "The wedding was yesterday." At that moment, my life split into two. Before, I was Malcolm, the loyal husband, the devoted father, the man who would do anything for his family. And after, I was something else. Because as I stood there, staring at my wife's smug face, something inside me snapped, not in anger, not in grief, but in quiet realization. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an oversight. They had deliberately excluded me. I went to Sophia, expecting her to scold her mother, expecting her to say this was all some misunderstanding, but she hesitated. Then, without a word, she pulled out her phone, tapped the screen. held it up for me to see, and there they were. My wife, my daughter, my in-laws, my siblings, smiling, laughing. At the wedding I paid for, without me. I looked at Deborah, the woman I had loved for over 30 years, the woman I had built a home with. She shrugged. Oh, I guess I forgot to tell you. Like it didn't matter, like I didn't matter. That's when I understood. They didn't just take me for granted. They didn't just use me as their bank account. To them, I was nothing. I placed my coffee mug on the counter. Deborah raised an eyebrow, expecting me to explode, expecting me to scream. Sophia shifted uncomfortably, sensing something was off. I didn't yell, I didn't beg, I didn't ask why. I simply walked out into the cold night air, and for the first time in my life, I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages, no last-minute apologies, nothing. I opened my banking app. For decades, I never saw my money as mine. I saw it as a husband, a father, a provider. But now, I saw it as the man they had used. Sophia's mortgage, her credit cards, her bills, Deborah's personal account, the wedding expenses, the honeymoon, every last cent came from me. And yet they laughed in my face. That's when I made my decision, one by one. I shut everything off. No more mortgage payments, no more credit cards, no more monthly deposits into Deborah's account, no more inheritance fund for Sophia. They didn't need me at the wedding? Well, let's see how well they do without my money. Stood there, under the night sky, feeling lighter than I had in years. They had made a crucial mistake. They thought I was predictable. They thought I would forgive, that I would always come back. Not this time. I had spent my entire life giving, sacrificing, believing in family, but now I understood. They had always known my worth. They had just never appreciated it, and they were about to learn what happens. When the man they took for granted finally walks away, the door opened, and I stepped back into the icy night air. My breath hung hazy before me as I made my way back. My heartbeat was calm, my footsteps precise. I wasn't going to yell or protest. Deborah was still at the dining table when I entered. They would be happy to see me break. Sophia strolled to the couch, scrolling through her phone, sipping her wine as if nothing had happened. As blank as ever, I watched them from the foyer. They didn't even flinch. No guilt, no explanation. They believed they had already won, that I would move on as usual. I would pout for a few days, then resume paying for their lives as if nothing had occurred. After a long silence, Deborah finally put her glass down with a gentle clink. "Are you finished being dramatic?" I didn't smile because I was amused, nor because I found any of this even slightly amusing. But I knew something she didn't, so I simply said, "Oh, I'm done." The first hint of uneasiness crossed her face. Her brows knitted together. With irritation in her voice, she replied, "I know you're upset, but it was only a wedding. You're acting as though we set the house on fire." I tilted my head slightly. "Interesting way to put it, Deborah, because you did, in a sense," she sneered. "Oh, come on." I looked at Sophia. She hardly raised her head from her phone. "We didn't intend to hurt you. Mom thought you were overreacting. But you're taking this too seriously, Dad." I thought I was repeating Sophia's words, but she hesitated, then shrugged. She had simply followed through. My own daughter had chosen to accept my absence at her wedding and smiled as she toasted to her new life, dancing under the lights for the cameras, knowing that I was sitting at home. It wasn't personal, but it was. A deep-seated feeling told me I still had a place in her world, but I was wrong. I exhaled sharply. "Go quiet, numb. All right." Deborah scowled. I didn't slam the door as I turned and walked into our bedroom. This wasn't a spontaneous act. I didn't tear items from the walls or stuff them into a suitcase. This was premeditated, intentional. I opened the closet, grabbed a duffel bag, and began packing: shirts, jeans, I didn't need much. I had no intention of turning back. From behind me, Deborah's voice drifted in. "Hold on, Malcolm. You're not going anywhere." I zipped up the bag, slung it over my shoulder, and replied, "I don't know." But for the first time, wherever I was going, I knew it would be better than here. That evening, I saw the first genuine glimmer of worry in her eyes. She hadn't anticipated this. She had expected resistance, rage, and outburst, but not my departure. I brushed past her, each step lightening the burden on my chest. "Malcolm," she called sharply. "Now you're being absurd." I didn't reply. I didn't turn. Around. I reached the front door, curled my fingers around the doorknob, and swung it open. The cold air rushed in, cutting through the warmth of the home that was no longer mine. They could keep it. I left, letting the door close behind me. There was a soft click. When my phone buzzed, I didn't turn back. Deborah's voice edged toward. Panic as she yelled my name again. I got into my car, turned on the ignition, and drove away from the house I had built with my own hands. A lifetime of sacrifice. For the first time in 30 years, I felt free. They believed they had won. That they could ignore me, laugh it off, let time heal the wounds they caused. They had no idea what was coming next. Because when you take someone for granted, you never realize what they truly gave you, until they take it all back. I drove through. The quiet streets of Rosewood Heights. Streetlights cast long shadows across the road. My fingers clenched the steering wheel tighter than necessary. My vision swam with the weight of the night. I wasn't angry anymore. Not sad. Not even surprised. I had made sacrifices and excuses for people who had made it clear. My value to them began and ended with what I could provide. I pulled into a small motel on the outskirts of town. I grabbed my phone, but not to call Deborah. Not to answer the flood of missed calls and messages that had already begun. Instead, I opened my banking app. For years, I had managed our finances. Deborah never cared to handle money. Sophia never paid attention either. It had always been me. I froze the joint account, stopped the mortgage payments, halted Sophia's monthly allowance. With a few taps, I moved my personal savings into a brand new account, one that had only my name on it. Deborah would call the bank. She would beg, demand, scream. She would try to reverse the limits, regain control. But for the first time in her life, she had none. I put the phone down and leaned against the cheap motel headboard, staring at the ceiling. Tonight, after decades of giving, I finally took something back. Myself. When I woke up, there were 26 missed calls. I ignored them. I showered, got coffee from a nearby diner, walked out into the crisp morning air. Then I checked my messages.